we going to exploit it? Do we believe composite applications have a role to play? So these are kind of decisions that, as a BPX, if this process can have been gone through, then your ability to then apply that to a solution is much quicker. If you don't have something like this, then you spend a lot of time arguing about what you might solve the solution with, instead of getting on and solving the solution. So I guess to evaluate on one of those boxes which talks about then trying to drive into the, which, given the number of solutions, what might you consider? And I think these are probably the key things to think about. So, does it do what I need it to do? How is it used currently in the organisation? Have I reached a tipping point whereby that technology is ubiquitous in the organisation? I think we just had a conversation about Visual Composer. So you can create a new user interface in Visual Composer in about 5 minutes, if you happen to have installed the composition environment in your landscape. If you haven't installed the composition environment in your landscape, it's going to take you about somewhere between a month to 3 months to get your IT department to provision a box, size the box, so you can then spend your 5 minutes creating your user interface. So those things need to be considered. Future, so is it referenceable? Is it mature? Am I going to do things that I regret doing later on? Will it interoperate with things later? And then what's the ownership perspective? So it might be the best product in the entire universe, but the licensing costs make it something we're not going to adopt. So these are questions that, if these can have been answered, they're kind of enablers to a BPX to make sure we know where we're going. And that gets us to something like this, which is a roadmap over time, telling us that we're going to be phasing some stuff in, phasing some stuff out, reaching tipping points, and achieving our end game. So some sort of guiding principles from that. You've got to have some guiding principles. So what defines good and bad? So the BPX, when you're defining your solution, it's no good including a component or a technology or a way of working that your organisation has defined as bad, because that solution isn't going to get adopted. So if we can have shared guiding principles, it helps. Working on some different scenarios. So we're always, or perhaps I'm just unlucky, but I always seem to work in brownfield organisations. So there's an existing as-is landscape. There's a wonderful target. How are we going to get there? What's the right thing to do? And there isn't one right answer. There are going to be pros and cons. 100% SAP. I'm not going to be tied to just one vendor. Whatever the answer might be, do different scenarios and look at the different total cost of ownership. And then the last piece down here is having defined the interventions, make sure you do them. I see a lot of people who define this is what we're going to go and do, and then it just gets kind of put on the shelf. And that's great, we're going to go and do that. They don't drive to make sure that these purple arrows actually get done. So when are we going to decommission other technologies? When are we going to phase things in? Anyway, so just a bit of background that if you're going to be successful as a BPX, the key thing here is that somebody has created that linkage for you between the business strategy and what is good and bad within your organisation. So then as a BPX I can focus on defining the solution, not having to go right back up the evolutionary value chain. So I guess just as a straw poll, how many people live in an environment where this has been done for them as BPXs? Anyone? A little bit. Big bit. People think it would be useful to have. I'm just trying to make it sort of a bit more interactive. So so this is a process that I've been through now with a couple of organisations. You don't have to boil the ocean to do it, but it's just getting some. I guess it's getting everybody bought into what's good and bad. So having done that, we can then get on to the business of a BPX, I guess, which is looking to design solutions. And again, as a good BPX, composite applications are not always going to be the right solution. It may well be that there's a good piece of ERP functionality that's just perfect for the job, and recreating that as a composite would just be non-value. So, first question we need to ask ourselves is why would I apply? Why would I think a composite application might be a good idea? And I would suggest that these 5 categories here are a good acid test for any process you're trying to enable. If it doesn't fall into one of these categories, you might question whether it should or shouldn't be a composite application. So, For sure, I think the top one is probably the biggest, I think, certainly in my experience, the biggest value driver for companies. So the ability to extend a process across across external boundaries or in siloed companies between departments is a great thing that you can do with composite applications. So we'll see that in the example. So taking a business process that currently ends at the walls of your organisation and enabling customers or suppliers to be much more joined up in that process in a collaborative way is something that's easy to do with composite applications.